reporting that nobody understands to having a story, to really explaining to people around the company, we're reducing this emission because it is linked to this service and that is how you use it. That was an interesting question from them. Pura Costa Rica Travel at the right-hand side. They wanted to, they're an eco-tourism organization, and they wanted to reduce their footprint and maybe even have a positive contribution. And a typical green entrepreneur, it's their product, biodiversity. An investor, MN Services. How can we take biodiversity into account? It was just mentioned. And can we also use impact investing maybe? Maybe invest in startups that have smart technical solutions. So the financial industry is really increasing the role in the area of biodiversity, internationally, everywhere. Another one that's sourcing all kinds of materials that just wants to bring down the footprint. Also, mostly we get very basic questions. I will come back to that later. Meatless, a company that basically produces replacements for meat. Meat is a big environmental problem, you could say. There's a lot of climate change attached to it and also a very high impact on biodiversity. They produce meatless products. They wanted to know we produce meatless, but what is still our impact and can we reduce it? Maybe one other, the duck doctors, the roof doctors in English. What they produce is green roofs. And I just explained the smart cities. Well, using green roofs in a city is one way of creating a smart city. Because it will add to the water catchment, it will add to air purification, it will add to insulation. It's a very smart use of nature, providing several services that you need in a city. And they're doing very good work. And they were wondering, can we also use this, for example, in livestock farming? And would it also maybe benefit animal welfare? So that's also one question. An interesting one came from Verstegen, spices and sauces. Not an SME, big company, sourcing around the world spices. And they were wondering, can we create an app or a game, gamification, for our suppliers to trigger best practices on natural capital? Very interesting. And why? Because many of these apps and these games are being produced by SMEs, by the eco-innovative entrepreneur that I showed you. And the fact that a company like Verstegen is doing this will also mean that their suppliers, which in most cases are small and medium-sized farmers, will have to comply with certain requirements, of course. So these are some of the questions that we get. Normally they're kind of basic. If you have an environmental management system in place according to ISO 14001, you would have plan, do, check, act. Well, in most cases, the SMEs do not work according plan, do, check, act. They start with inspiration, like you see here. First, they want to inspire people. They're doing nice things, good things, positive things, to really make people within the company and around the company enthusiastic about the topic of biodiversity. Because contrary maybe to climate change, which is about carbon, biodiversity is about very nice things. It's about a green environment. It's about fauna and flora. There's things that people like. So inspiration is relatively easy on biodiversity. When you have inspired people, the next step would be to motivate the managers. Because is there also business sense in this? Will be the next question. And that's when you look at the business case. Are clients asking for it? Is the bank requiring it? Is there maybe an innovation that we can focus on? And then basically, in practice, you see then the step comes, then what is my relation with biodiversity? It's only the third step in this case, to know what you're doing. Then you start doing it, and then you share your experiences. And a different type of entrepreneurs you see also at different places. On the do side, you have the eco-innovation entrepreneur. He already knows that it's important. He sees the opportunities. He doesn't start with inspiring or motivating, he starts doing it. That's the social enterprises, for example, that you have, the startups that you see. The future-proof entrepreneur really has to start with inspiration and motivation. Because otherwise the managers will say, well, it's all very nice biodiversity, but I will go to the zoo in the weekend. You will have to convince them. The green entrepreneur is already doing it. He's working with nature. And those are the people that already start sharing it for example, in tourism. To finalize, the moment they start doing something, it's either they work on a handprint, you could say, and in this case the handprint is doing positive things for biodiversity, or they start working on their footprint, and they start reducing their footprint on biodiversity. The handprint can have all different kind of forms. One example is the greening of the company locations. Be it a green roof, be it making a corridor maybe for animals that want to migrate, be it just establishing a pond where you would have wildlife, and all different ways of doing that. But also working in the local environment with other stakeholders to create a smart area where you keep natural capital in place. And there are very interesting examples of that already. In the Netherlands, in the municipality of the south of Holland, there's a cooperation between, I think, around 200 different stakeholders, and they basically decided we are going to bring the bee back in the area. And there's a big problem around the disappearance of bees and pollination services. And they decided we are going to cooperate with farmers, but also with the citizens, basically, with their backyards, and also with the companies to bring back the bee. And this is the kind of example of cooperation that you would get in the area. And of course, this is more the traditional thinking, reducing the footprint. Thinking about your production process, reducing emissions, looking at the resources that you use, finding the most resource efficient mode of transport. That's about the whole supply chain, of course, and that's about reduction of the footprint. And if you play it smart, if you reduce your footprint and you increase your handprint, you may even end up at a no net loss or at a net positive contribution. And I guess in the end, it's not a matter whether SMEs will focus on biodiversity, but when SMEs will focus on biodiversity. What we see happen in the different cities, what we see happen in the rural areas, is that municipalities, provinces, they're starting to cooperate with each other because they know if the natural capital disappears, then a lot of services will disappear and we're in trouble. Combined with the fact that it's a fun thing to work with, it really works. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bohr. I think the challenge always is for the small and medium companies as to how to focus on the urgent and the immediate, which is imperative in their mind because there are a lot of issues confronting them as small entrepreneurs who are already there. Then to look at this very important issue which has a very long-term payback. So I hope that you can inspire and create an imperative in this very important issue as well, and hopefully they can get to increasing their handprint and reducing their footprint. We hope to look forward to cooperating with you and maybe request CIMA to look at that whether we can create some kind of a cluster activity in terms of getting them to first get together, and then you could inspire them to at least take some few steps towards this very important issue. Thank you so much. Now we have Dr. Suhas. Dr. Suhas Uday is the Chairman and Managing Director of BioCare. He himself has been awarded many times over in terms of business excellence. He's an entrepreneur and also he's the founder member of Center of Sustainable Development in Vidarbha Industries Association. He has been also awarded as the top 26 innovative companies in India by CII. So congratulations, and we really now get the hands-on experience as to how he has actually done it.
Thank you, Mr. Kapuriaji, Asha ma'am. I think I represent the SME here, and I am not really expert on biodiversity, but my business is a pro-biodiversity business, so I think I'll share my views on with you on my biodiversity and how it really works with SME. As Mr. Kapuria has already mentioned that SME things are difficult in looking at biodiversity because we are with so much of harmful problems. I think we really look at biodiversity, and I'll tell you, sir, that even the biodiversity boards at the state level also doesn't understand much about the biodiversity itself. And that's a challenge where I think CII and IBBI, I think we should take this up and make them aware of this, because I happen to speak to a few of the members of the Biodiversity Board, and their understanding about the act, I think this is one of the most misunderstood act which I felt while discussing with them. Definitely in the developing countries like India, you cannot say that SME doesn't have a role to play in biodiversity, because we influence the biodiversity to a larger extent. For that matter, everybody is affecting the biodiversity. Even if your business is not there directly involved into biodiversity, but somehow your suppliers, your investment is already into the business where the biodiversity get affected. I come from a biotechnology-based industry which works in agricultural sector, and agricultural area is actually have a very different relationship with the biodiversity. It actually needs biodiversity, and it actually influences biodiversity. Especially when we want to work in the field of organic agriculture, which is our business. We feel that this is a very pre-biodiversity kind of a business, but to make money in this kind of business is extremely difficult because to make your products awareness to the consumer, it is a very expensive thing. It's very costly. Mr. Bauer has just mentioned about the bees. I tell you, I want to share one of my experiences about because one of our verticals of businesses required the honey from forest. And conventionally, these tribal people used to burn all the beehives and extract the honey from it. They used to burn the beehives and get that down and extract all the honey. When we found this practice, we found that it's extremely it's cruel to really harvest the honey in this fashion. So we talked to a local NGO who were expert in this, and they actually had devised one technique where they get the core of that beehive, and once that core is cut, they bring that core down on the ground, extract the honey, and again take back that comb and put it on so the colonies are not disturbed. And this was a very sustainable, because when people started, there was a lot of pressure on honey cultivation or honey procurement on the forest. So all the beehives, bee colonies were disappeared from our area. And once we started initiating this kind of intervention, the beehives and bee colonies started again reappearing in those areas. But I'll tell you one problem in this area, because the honey hunter has to climb twice to get the honey. He could only collect half of the honey which you conventionally collect. So the price for honey which we collected in this way has actually 30–40% were more expensive. And to communicate this to our consumer was extremely difficult. So the point comes that the financial product around these sustainable or green entrepreneurs is critically important, and none of our existing banking system really recognizes that this kind of a business require a little more hand-holding. And that's where I think the eminent people are there to really elaborate on this. I think this is very important to develop. The SME's impact on biodiversity is very high, because if you look at number of SMEs in our countries and the business which we do, and it contributes to the GDP, we certainly cannot really